I think this is fascinating and exciting, and it gives us a new form of community and shared experience. And what I want to do in the next 20 minutes is share, honestly, some of our experience. And I think, like most businesses, there is a sort of public perception of how we're responding and how we might want to be seen to respond. But there's a lot of harder learnings beneath the surface. And I just want to brutally take you through that and how we're now changing. For those who don't know Blenheim or know much about us, really quickly, we're a landed estate. And the land bit is kind of important to us because we're very physically attached to where we are, much more so than most businesses. And so we're based at Woodstock, about 6 miles north of Oxford. In fact, 5 miles north of 5 Mile Drive, which was so named because it was Blenheim land, and it was sold and named by the 8th Duke or something as 5 Mile Drive to reflect its distance. We have a big visitor attraction, big property businesses, big land management businesses, and it's all about the soil, really. We think because of that very physical and enduring connection that we are kind of the ultimate purpose-led business, and we express our purpose as being to be the lifeblood of the local economy, to enhance the lives of local people, and to share and protect this extraordinary place. And I put that up front and center mostly because I don't feel we have lived that purpose belief through the first stage of this crisis, and that's a failure of leadership on my part. It isn't about the people around me. So let me tell you why I think that and what we're now doing about it now we've sort of had that realization. So what did we find out about ourselves in the crisis? Well, pre-shutdown, my observation would be we were quite good at predicting what was coming. I mean, we were sort of stocking up on disinfectants and that, in late January, and forcing our staff to work from home, etc. So we were quite good at predicting that we were going to have problems, but we were actually quite poor at doing anything meaningful about it in two ways. But both our practical preparations weren't of anything like the right scale, but also we didn't lift our eyes up towards the horizon and say, right, once we're in this full-blown crisis, which we can see coming, what is the role of Blenheim and what's the most useful thing we can do for the world around us? So the short-term practical stuff, as we sat there cheerfully ordering PPE in late January and sorting out our liquidity to make sure that we would have enough available cash, we simply didn't do it on anything like the right scale. It's like the shutters came down, and because we were doing something, we felt we were doing enough. And I don't think we seriously discussed either the length of the crisis that might come, but also just how much PPE, for example, we might need when we eventually get to reopen. We also, frankly, having talked about dividing into two teams so that one team would always be safe, didn't get anywhere near that. Although we rotated people in and out, we've really stayed with one team on site and the rest working away, and we haven't rotated much at all. The other observation I'd make going into the crisis is however much we tried to get ahead of things, particularly when it came to closing down the visitor attraction, we just struggled to stay ahead of the curve. Every time we said we should close down these facilities but keep the rest open to X date, we found ourselves being overtaken by reality very, very rapidly, and had to change our plans repeatedly. And that was embarrassing with our own staff, but it also was a failure, I think, to comprehend the scale and speed of what was coming, and to really overrate the notion of trading for 2 or 3 more days versus the scale of the reality that was coming our way. And I think one other failure in our pre-shutdown planning was we were pretty good at home working. We'd done as preparation, we'd done our payroll from home for a couple of months before the shutdown, just to make sure that mission critical things like that could take place at home. You know what? We completely missed the need to scale up our online security. And we've had 2 or 3 near misses recently, and we've done more to upgrade our security in the last 4 weeks than I think we had in the 4 years prior to that. And again, that's just a simple failure to look through what was coming. But the main point I want to make is we were not doing anything distinctive at that point. If you think back to that purpose statement I told you earlier, lifeblood of local economy, enhancing the lives of local people, sharing and protecting this place, all we did at this point was survival mode. We didn't think about anything we could do to support the community around us, and that's a community we own much of. And then when the onslaught really arrived, I don't think we covered ourselves in glory either. We did what many, many businesses did, which is figure out how to shut down as quickly as possible and, frankly, think through just how many redundancies and pay cuts and things like that we might need in different scenarios simply to survive. And I was wrongly, I think, obsessed by that Darwin misquote, that famous one where they say it is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It's the one that is most adaptable to change. And this idea that we wouldn't regret changing quickly. And while that bought us time, it was a fairly brutal response. It ignored most of the more participatory options for our staff. And it wasn't remotely true to our beliefs. I think I'm grateful that the furlough scheme came along when it did, because it allowed us to do exactly what the government wanted us to do, which was to buy us time to protect our staff and rebuild. So again, at that point, nothing that we did was distinctive, and nothing put our staff and the community first, really. Now, what we've done since in phase 2 is a bit of a mixed bag, and I'm going to tell you the list, not to big ourselves up in any way, but because you will observe it is a mixed bag, and importantly, it was generally reactive, so responding to opportunities. It wasn't proactive, i.e. us saying, what is the role of Blenheim through its communities through this troubling period? By the way, someone's just asking, have I drained the lake early? And no, we haven't, except to a certain extent. We've had to postpone the lake dredge, big decision for us. But there is some mandatory works to our dam that have to take place. So we have quietly lowered the water level, but you will have noticed we've had the sunniest May ever. There's been no rain, and our lake is a tidal lake, so it is slightly based on the amount of water coming in. So it's not entirely in our control. Anyway, the mixed bag of things we've got on with since, reactive, not proactive. So we've built with our neighbours, Owen Mumford, and with some amazing members of the Bladen community, an online site called thehelphub.co.uk, and we funded it. And that brings together, it's over 200 qualified counsellors now. And if you're someone who needs some support, you can go onto that site, and usually within an hour, we'll have you on touch in a Zoom session with qualified counsellors who will give you at least a 20-minute session free of charge to support you, and you can come back for more. We've helped thousands of people now, and it's something that's growing. It's nationwide, incidentally, although we started it locally. And that's something we think's really got legs. We've supported some of the local community groups that have sprung up with resources, so providing them with vehicles and other logistical support, getting food out to local isolated people, that kind of thing. And actually with the Hanborough COVID support group, they wanted a very positive endeavour to unite the community. So we've supplied a huge amount of seeds and pots and compost, which they have distributed through Hanborough. And they're having now an online growing competition and comparing stuff on Facebook. And they think that's something that's helped them a lot. We got support from our suppliers for that too. So that was nice. But again, it was something we were approached by the Hanborough group and asked to help. And we did that. We are working on a voluntary delivery infrastructure for Woodstock shops to deliver pre-ordered goods to people in the area, and we have for some time been promoting the surprisingly high level of Woodstock businesses who can trade online or remotely. And so we're promoting that to our very large database. I'm not sure how practically helpful that has been, but they can see we are promoting their activities and taking people to them. And I think especially locally, there's a real thirst to do business locally and support their neighbours. So a bunch of things there. We've also, our catering team has been cooking and delivering meals for vulnerable people in another community in Barton on the edge of Oxford for the last few weeks, and that's been helpful. And we've provided office space and food products and things to a number of other places. Now, most of those things are about supporting the community around us, but it's been absolutely opportunistic rather than effectively planned out. And looking back, I think we could have done so much more had we gathered our people together in that early period where we could see what's coming down the tracks towards us. And bear in mind, a lot of our people live in our communities too. I think their thoughts about how we could live out our purpose through this crisis would have been incredibly powerful. We could have done so much more. And I'm quite disappointed right now that we started with a purpose statement that said we want to be the lifeblood of the local economy. We want to enhance the lives of local people, and we want to share and protect this place. And we end up with the list I've just told you. And that truly is a failure of leadership. You know, I went into survival mode. I didn't lift up my eyes. I didn't encourage other people to have bigger thoughts. And I didn't give them permission, to refer to a previous presentation, to try stuff and fail. We didn't ever attempt to articulate this plan of what that purpose would mean in the next 6 months. And I'm quite disappointed by that, because we all know it's really, really easy to talk about being special and different and distinctive when times are good. The acid test comes when you carry it on when it's really, really difficult. And right now, for me, I failed that acid test, and to a certain extent, Blenheim did too. Now, before I quickly talk about what we're now going on to do, one observation that's fascinated me and is probably in common for many businesses is the lockdown has been the ultimate zero-based review of our business. Like many, many businesses, yeah, we are a product of incrementalism. You know, we start doing one thing, we think it's a great idea to add on another thing, so we add on a layer for that, and we maybe recruit some more people for that, and so you end up with a structure that's the product of a series of decisions, and it's always easier to add than subtract. Every now and then we do what we accountants know as a zero-based budgeting exercise, where you attempt to challenge every cost line and say, essentially, if we want to end up with these outputs, what's the minimum resource we need to do it? And if we were starting from scratch today, what would we build to deliver those customer outcomes, as opposed to how do we deliver them today? And so we've had a lot of fun over the last 10 weeks creating so-called Phoenix groups who have torn into everything. And these are, if to use the sort of software development analogy, they're scrum teams where we try and get a good mix of resource, and we challenge them to think the unthinkable, to see if we can do things more efficiently. And like all the best continuous improvement processes, we try to be really clear. Jobs won't go on the back of the efficiencies that you create. What we're really looking to do is to get more efficient and to free up resource for other things later, because we don't want resource tied up in inefficient processes. And that's now relevant as we lift our heads up, take stock, and attempt to reassert ourselves. And if lifeblood of local economy, enhancing the lives of local people, and sharing and protecting this place means anything, then it has to mean something right now. And we need a program to deliver this right now in this environment, because it's needed more than ever. And our big headline points, I guess, are: we are blessed. Liquidity isn't our biggest issue. So if I can invest now into things to accelerate our long-term goals, then And we can do that in a way that gives a real local boost. And that's an incredibly powerful thing for us to do. And we're lucky we secured our liquidity early on in the crisis. It also, these schemes I'm going to talk about, provide an outlet for our staff in a period in which realistically they're not going to be fully utilized at best, or at worst, their jobs could be at risk. So having a plan as to what we will do with these brilliant people is really important. And I think today we have a disproportionate opportunity to do this kind of thing with real impact. So we've talked about a program which we will launch soon. We've nicknamed it Blenheim QE, although I have to confess it turned out a couple of weeks into the discussions that some of the people I was talking to had no idea what QE stood for. They just thought it was another weird DOM acronym. But it's based on the quantitative easing that we've seen central banks, but it's a really hyper-local thing for us. Now, none of these is a signed off list, but they give you a flavor of the kind of thing we're looking at. So we have, and we've been pushing for a little bit of time, a project called Grassroots, which is linking up our communities to each other with brilliant cycle paths and work hubs. So we're looking at that and saying, well, can we bring that on much more quickly? Can we deploy spare resource from around the estate? Instead of saying you're spare, in inverted commas, redundant, can we deploy you into building community facilities, rewilding work, building work hubs? In Bladon, the local community company has bought the White House in Bladon from Green King and are looking to do it up as a work hub, and we're backing them. But can we do much more to help them now we have spare resource? Can we build community energy projects? Can we market the area, not just ourselves, but can we promote Oxfordshire as we get the big relaxation? Creating a delivery network for local businesses, including our local farmers who in some cases have a lot of spare crops. Can we help promote Oxfordshire nationally? Can we promote other attractions while we have spare marketing resource? And in particular, doing things like taking our spend and much more brutally spending it locally. And can we campaign for others to spend money locally and support more local businesses? Doing a bottom-up review of all of our transactions to make sure everything is spent with local businesses that we can. Can we today double up our local community funding and persuade other businesses to join us to fund community projects? So there's a whole raft of things that we're thinking of doing, very, very focused on the local area under this banner of Blenheim QE. But the real lessons for us is about what we found out about ourselves in this process. Well, first thing we found out was we weren't special intrinsically. We responded to the crisis in the same way that many others. If we're to be different, it requires practice and honesty and learning. So there's two big themes I just want to tell you straight out about how we are changing now to live out that purpose. The first is this crisis may well happen again, not just in terms of another infection, but actually a second wave of this one. And like many of us, we need a better plan. It's been interesting to observe how quickly the Asian nations responded because they'd learned again from a previous virus incident. So we need a better plan for how we deal with that, how we take immediate precautions, how we work immediately with the local community to put in place community resilience. We're part of this place, and these moments make us. And we have the chance to bring our communities together even more than they've brought themselves together. And interestingly, even when we've done small things to help our local communities, we've got disproportionate recognition, and it's slightly embarrassing. And in terms of a better plan for medium-term recovery, knowing what we will swing into action and do as things start to wake up. The second, and I guess final learning for us is a number of social structures have emerged around us. They're not the old structures. Community organizations have come together from nothing to support each other, and we can now work with them because they don't want to disappear. They want to carry on, and we want to seize the opportunity to work with them to multiply our efforts. And it should be easy because we're physically in that community. So we need the better plan for responding to the crisis. We need a better plan to be true to ourselves in the recovery phase, and we need to work with those new community structures. And we need to give ourselves not just permission, but to kind of really beat ourselves up that we are about our purpose, the lifeblood of the local economy, enhancing the lives of local people, sharing and protecting this place. And that doesn't just matter in the good days, it matters even more in the worst days.